First of all, I would like to offer my many Dashtelek and greetings to everyone who have gathered here on Zoom, especially from many different countries across the globe, such as from Asia, America, Western and Eastern Europe, and Russia, and so on. And I would like to especially thank Sangchen Norbu Ling to invite me to speak here today. So the teaching that I will be giving today is known as the 8 verses of training the mind. And it is one of the most important and famous mind training teachings. And it was taught by the great Kadamba master, Geshe Langri Thangpa Dorje Singye. So Geshe Langri Thangpa was born in the year 1054, which is in the 11th century. And he founded the Kadamba monastery known as Langthang Monastery. So the place where he founded the monastery is known as Langthang, and the monastery itself is also named from the place, so therefore known as Langthang Monastery. And therefore the founder of the monastery is also known as Langthangpa as well. So he was one of the most important disciples of the great Kadamba master Geshe Potowa Rinchen Sen. So Geshe Langri Thangpa was a disciple of Geshe Potowa. Geshe Potowa was a disciple of Domtenpa, the great master Domtenpa, and the great master Domtenpa in turn was a great disciple of the great Indian master known as Atisha Dipamkara Srijana, who visited Tibet in the 11th century. So that is sort of like the lineage of the Kadamba, the early lineage of the Kadamba teachings. And so Langri Thangpa founded the Langthang monastery, and it initially was a Kadamba monastery, but later became a Sakya monastery, as later on the Kadamba tradition became extinct. So Geshe Langri Thangpa wrote several works, but the most well known among all of his works is this very short teaching known as the 8 verses of training the mind. And although it is very short, such as the teachings of Atisha, Domtenpa, and Potowa, so therefore, although it is very short, there's nothing that is incomplete in it. And Geshe Langri Thangpa passed away in the year 1123.
Recording in progress.
So that is in the early 12th century. So that is a little bit of a... So to start the teaching, any kind of teaching, it is very important to receive it with the correct motivation, that when you receive the teaching from the teaching, this not really for our, it is not mainly for our benefit, but it is rather mainly for the benefit of others. So the whole purpose of receiving the teachings is so that one may attain enlightenment. And we so the mindset that we must have while receiving the teachings is that today I'm receiving the teachings in front of the teacher, in the presence of the teacher, and the purpose for receiving these teachings is because these teachings are so precious. It teaches or shows the path to complete enlightenment. And if I practice these teachings, I also can attain enlightenment. As I have the spiritual potential to attain enlightenment, I have the ability to attain enlightenment if I can work hard, if I can put effort into practicing the Dhamma. And so if I can practice these teachings, I can attain enlightenment. But in order to practice these teachings, I must first receive it properly from the teacher. And once having received these teachings from the teacher in the correct way, and having practiced these teachings, I will eventually attain enlightenment. And once I attain enlightenment, I will have the complete ability to save all sentient beings from their misery, and will be able to lead them to complete peace and happiness, which is the state of enlightenment. And so it is with this kind of mindset that one must receive these teachings. So now with this mindset, I will now have, with all of you having generated this mindset, I will now start the teaching. So there are 8 points that Geshe Langri Thamba speaks on, and these 8, because there's 8 points that we need to understand, there are also 8 verses. So each verse speaks on each of the points. So therefore, because there are 8 points, there are 8 verses. So to speak of the first verse, it reads, "By thinking of all sentient beings is more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. For accomplishing the highest aim, I will always hold them dear." So this is the first verse of these 8 verses. And what Geshe Langri Thamba is saying here is that the wish-fulfilling jewel, if we find a wish-fulfilling jewel, we are very fortunate, we are very lucky, because the wish-fulfilling jewel can grant our wishes, all of the temporary wishes at least, such as a long life, good health, prosperity, and so on in this life. But even more precious than the wish-fulfilling jewel is sentient beings. And by sentient beings, Geshe Langri Thamba is saying all the beings that have a mind, all the individuals that have a mind, who can think, and who are at least alive, you could say. All the animate beings, all the animate objects, and that is sentient beings. So all sentient beings have been taught by Lord Buddha Shakyamuni and all of the great Buddhist masters, especially those of the Mahayana tradition, as being one's own mother in one's past lives, because samsara, or you could say cyclic existence, is beginningless. There's no beginning to samsara. Because we have had the faults such as ignorance in our minds from beginningless time, you can also be sure that we have been circling, and you could say have been stuck in samsara since beginningless time. And so therefore, from lifetime to lifetime, we take a new rebirth each time. And in most cases, each time we take rebirth, we take birth from a mother. Although, you know, it is not necessary for all types of birth, because there are different ways to be born. Sometimes you can be born, if you're very fortunate, you can be born from a lotus, like Guru Brahmasambhava, or you could be born from a womb, a mother's womb, just as normal human beings are born. Or you could be born from an egg. Some sentient beings are born from eggs. And then some sentient beings are also born from heat, a body's heat. So sometimes each person has a lot of heat in their body, and from that many microorganisms are born due to that. And so there are mainly 4 ways to be born, but here we are speaking about mainly the sentient beings who are born from a mother's womb, and most sentient beings are born from a mother's womb. So we are speaking about that type of sentient beings. So anyways, because we have been born beginningless, we have been constantly been reborn again and again. We have taken all these different types of rebirths, and because we have certainly taken many uncountable rebirths from a mother's womb, it also means that we have had a mother in many of our past lives. And since samsara is beginningless, because samsara is beginningless, the rebirths that we have had is also cannot be estimated. It is beyond our understanding, our comprehension, and so on. And because of that, we also have had an uncountable number of mothers as well. And so each time we were born to a mother, the mother was very kind to us, especially because they gave birth to us. And by giving birth to us, they gave us one of the greatest gifts, which is the human birth. Because the human birth is one of the best births which you can take in samsara. And that is because with the human birth, it is most easiest to practice the Buddha Dharma, because generally speaking, there are 6 types or 6 classes of sentient beings in samsara. There are the gods, the demigods, the humans, the animals, the hungry ghosts, and the hell beings. So in most of the cases, many of these beings do not have the chance or the time to practice the Dharma, because if you think about the hell beings, they suffer so much due to great heat, intense heat, or intense cold. And so therefore, because they are engulfed in such suffering all the time, the thought of practicing the Dharma can hardly occur in their minds. And so they do not have the time to practice the Dharma. As for the hungry ghosts, they are always suffering due to great hunger and thirst. And due to that, the thought of practicing the Dharma can hardly occur in their mind. For animals, animals suffer due to ignorance, due to stupidity, and they also suffer due to other animals eating them. So the more powerful animals will kill and eat, and the weaker animals, and so therefore they suffer due to that, and therefore the thought of practicing the Dharma can also not occur in their minds. It's very difficult. And then if you think about the gods or the celestials, you could say, they experience too much happiness. They are always happy, and because they are taken away, because they're too distracted with their happiness, the thought of practicing the Dharma cannot occur easily. As for the sentient beings of the demigods, the demigods, the sentient beings of the demigod realm, you could say, they are always at war with the celestials or the gods, and so therefore they are too busy with fighting. They are too busy fighting with the gods, and therefore cannot think of practicing the Dharma. But as for the humans, it is not like the earlier mentioned, because the humans do not suffer too much, nor are they too happy. But there's a perfect sort of like a balance for humans. They don't suffer as much as the hell beings, nor are they too happy as the celestials. So there's a good balance. And when there's this good balance between happiness and suffering, the thought of practicing the Dharma can occur in one's mind, and one can also find the time to practice the Dharma. And so therefore, we should all feel very fortunate that we have taken a birth as a human. And we should also feel very grateful to all sentient beings, because all sentient beings have at one point been one's mother, and they had in the past given birth to oneself. And by giving birth to oneself in the future, in the past, they gave us the chance many times to practice the Dharma. And you could say, what brought you here in this present life? You are a human in this life, and you are enjoying life much more compared to other types of sentient beings. And so therefore, this, of course, is due to one's own merit, in the past lives. But we should also understand that what we are right now, all of the happiness that we are experiencing right now, must also be remembered as the kindness of all sentient beings who have been one's mother, because we need to have performed a certain amount of good merit to have attained the human birth in this life. So it means that we had accumulated the merit in the past. And most of the merit that we had accumulated in the past that led to our current human birth was all merit that we had accumulated in the past as humans. And so therefore, the person who gives the human birth to us is one's own mother. And so therefore, we must always remember the mother's kindness. So I would like to just remind you about that. But to get back to the main point of this verse, it is saying that a wish-fulfilling jewel, in the past, wish-fulfilling jewels were more easily available in this world, especially in ancient India. You could find jewels, and especially sometimes sailors would sail into the ocean, and in order to retrieve jewels, wish-fulfilling jewels from the depths of the ocean, and so on. And so there are many different types of wish-fulfilling jewels. But anyways, what the wish-fulfilling jewel, the benefit of having the wish-fulfilling jewel is that if you have the wish-fulfilling jewel, it can achieve all of one's desires. It can fulfill all of one's desires or wishes in this life, such as long life, good health, happiness, prosperity, and so on. But it can only, its power is sort of limited. It can only grant the temporary temporary auspiciousness or temporary luck in samsara. Although it is called a wish-fulfilling jewel, the samsaric wish-fulfilling jewel cannot grant enlightenment, because enlightenment must always be something which one must attain through one's own efforts. So therefore, Geshe-la Thapa is saying that although the wish-fulfilling jewel is very powerful, as it can grant all of the temporary wishes or desires that we have, there's something that is even more powerful than the wish-fulfilling jewel, and that is sentient beings. So one may wonder, how is sentient beings more precious, more powerful it's just that it is a more powerful wish-fulfilling jewel compared to the ordinary or samsaric wish-fulfilling jewel. So the first two lines speak, Geshe-la Thapa writes here in the first two lines, by thinking of all sentient beings as more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. So what he means by that is that the way we view sentient beings is that we must look towards sentient beings as being very important, very precious, and even more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. And the third line of this verse reads, for accomplishing the highest aim. And what that means is that here, Geshe Langri Tamba is explaining why is sentient beings more precious than the ordinary wish-fulfilling jewel. So this is the answer, for accomplishing the highest aim. And so the reason why it is more, sentient beings are more precious than the ordinary wish-fulfilling jewel is because it is due to sentient beings that enlightenment can be achieved, and enlightenment can be attained. Sentient beings are basically the causes, one of the most important causes for attaining enlightenment. It was taught by Shantideva in his very acclaimed work known as The Way of the Bodhisattva, that the Buddha and sentient beings are equal in importance. The reason why is because by listening to the Buddha's teachings, by following the Buddha, by having devotion in the Buddha, and so on, one can attain enlightenment. The Buddha is the guide who shows us the path, which if we follow, we can attain enlightenment. And therefore, the Buddha is one of the main causes for attaining enlightenment. But not only is the Buddha one of the main causes, but also sentient beings. And they are also the cause, one of the most important causes for attaining enlightenment, because sentient beings are the sort of like the object of our compassion. It is because that sentient beings who suffer exist that we can have an object to practice compassion. And compassion is one of the most important causes for attaining enlightenment. Without compassion, we cannot attain enlightenment. And without sentient beings, there are no objects to practice compassion. And so therefore, in that way, first of all, to sort of explain the connection between, the connection between sentient beings and enlightenment. The most important, of course, there are many causes to attain enlightenment, but the most important cause among all causes of attaining enlightenment is the bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, in which one wishes to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Now, the cause of bodhicitta, or the mind of enlightenment itself, is compassion. Without compassion, bodhicitta cannot be born in one's mind. So one needs to have compassion. And the thought of, or the sort of like the definition of compassion is basically the thought in which you wish, may all sentient beings be freed from suffering and the causes of suffering. And so that is the thought of compassion. And so therefore, we need sentient beings in order to practice compassion, in order to generate compassion. Without sentient beings, there's no object to practice compassion. And without sentient beings, there is no purpose to attain enlightenment. Because the whole purpose of attaining enlightenment is to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, to help them, to pull them out of suffering, and to deliver them to the greatest state of happiness. And so therefore, sentient beings is necessary to have in order to attain enlightenment, in order to practice the causes, to train in the causes of attaining enlightenment. And so therefore, as Geshe Langri Tamba says, for accomplishing the highest aim. So sentient beings help in accomplishing the highest aim because they serve as one of the main causes for attaining the highest aim, which is enlightenment. And so therefore, because sentient beings are even more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel because they help accomplish the highest aim, Geshe Langri Tamba writes here in the fourth line of the first verse, I will always hold them dear. So because of the earlier mentioned reasons of why sentient beings are precious and why and how they help to attain enlightenment, because of those reasons, I will always hold all sentient beings who have been one's own mother and who have been very kind to oneself in the past, very dear at all times. So this is the first verse of the 8 verses of training the mind, and it speaks about the first point of the 8 points. Following that, we have the second verse. Whenever I am in the company of others, I will regard myself as the lowest among all, and from the depths of my heart, cherish others as supreme. So this is the second point. And here Geshe Langri Tamba is basically saying that for a practitioner, a mind training practitioner, it is very important to consider others as greater than oneself, and to consider oneself always at all times as lower than others, whether it be in education or knowledge or experience and so on, anything. This might, not apply to those, it would probably not make much sense to those who live an ordinary life and who do not practice the Dharma, because of course, if you are more learned than somebody else, if you have more experience, you could probably be, you would have more reasons to think of yourself as being more high. You would have more reasons to think of yourself more highly than others. But for a Dharma practitioner, and especially a practitioner of mind training, it does not work, because as a practitioner of mind training, it doesn't matter how much how experienced you are, how learned you are, or how much experience or learned you are, or how much you know. Basically, it doesn't matter. As a Dharma practitioner, it is always important to be humble. It is very important to be humble, because if you're not humble, and if you become very proud of your Dharma practice, the results attained from your Dharma practice. For example, when we practice the Dharma, we will study the Buddha's teachings, and due to that, it is very possible that we will fall into the trap of becoming very arrogant and proud that we know much more compared to others. We know much more than other people do. And also from having meditated for many minutes or hours or days or for years, it could be, it is also very likely that we will fall into the trap of thinking that I am a great Dharma practitioner and everyone else is much more inferior than me. It is very likely that we will fall into that trap as well. So if we, let ourselves fall into such traps as Dharma practitioners, then we have failed as Dharma practitioners. And in the end, you could say the medicine has turned into poison, because the whole point of practicing the Dharma is to become a better person. Of course, it is to become more learned, and to not just to become more learned. Of course, we need to become learned by generating wisdom, and we also need to be very compassionate, become very compassionate through our Dharma practice by generating loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and so on. But if in the end all of the Dharma practice just leads to pride and arrogance, then the medicine has turned into poison. The medicine, the Dharma, which is like the medicine, has turned into poison, and then it doesn't benefit oneself, and it certainly does not benefit others. And so therefore we must always be aware of that, and be on the lookout for that, and to make sure that we do not fall into such traps as Dharma practitioners. So, all of these 8 points, it must be understood that Geshe Langri Tamba, he himself practiced these daily. So he is, of course, introducing these practices to us. He is saying that I have practiced these, all of these practices. It must be practiced by all practitioners who are focusing on mind training practice. And it must be practiced at all times. He is saying that I myself practice these, but not only do I practice these right now, but may I also be able to successfully practice all of these in the future as well. And also may all of my followers, my disciples, also follow these teachings. So it should be understood in that way. So once again, to get back to the second verse, Geshe Langri Tamba says, whenever I'm in the company of others, I will regard myself as the lowest among all. So, because we are human beings and we need to socialize, it never works to live alone. It's natural in life to socialize. There are many people that we already have contact with, such as our parents, our relatives, our friends. And there are also many people that we do not know. Many unfamiliar people, many people that we are yet to know, and many strangers, and so on. And so basically, wherever one goes, especially at a place where there are many people, whether it's, not just many people, whether there are just a little number of people, or if there's a great number of people, such as if one is going, or you could say if one is among a large crowd, whatever the case, one should always look upon oneself as the lowest among all. And there's a good reason to do this, because we as sentient beings, because we do not have control over our own mind, of course we have a certain amount of control because the actions of the body and speech are all controlled by the mind. But I don't mean that. I mean that we have these faults known as the three poisons, which are ignorance, attachment, and hatred, or you could say anger. And in most of the time in our lives, sort of like all of our actions are directed by these three, one of these, or it could be all together, or it could be one of these three poisons, or these three faults. And most of the time, our mind falls into listening to whatever the ignorance says, or attachment wants, or anger, whatever anger wants. So once we have great anger, we lose control over, over understanding what is correct and what is incorrect, and we just, our emotions burst out, and we will yell at people. We might even hit them if one is very angry, and so on. We might even fight them, or punch them, or slap them, or the anger leads to such incidents. And most of these incidents, once they have occurred, are all sort of things that one will only regret in the end. One will end up thinking, why did I even do that? And it will, of course, one will be embarrassing oneself in the process, and so on. And then also attachment towards one's loved ones, and so on. It's important to sort of understand the difference between love and attachment. Usually in attachment, when we speak of attachment, of course you have a great liking towards somebody, but in most cases you always wish for something in return by liking them. You want something in return from the connection. If you have attachment towards your parents, it's likely that you want something in return, such as happiness. And then if you have a connection with your partner, a relationship with your partner, and it is mainly out of attachment, more out of attachment, it's likely that, of course, you will like them and you will do things for them to please them, but you always want something in return. So that is sort of like not true love, according to the Buddha's teachings. true love, according to the Buddha's teachings, are unconditional love, in which you solely wish for others to be happy, for them to be benefited in any way. And you don't really care for, if they return your kindness, if they repay your kindness or not, you don't really care. And that is sort of like the real loving kindness, or the real love. But for most sentient beings, the love that we have is the love which is mixed with attachment. So that sort of love can be very dangerous. So I just wanted to mention that. But anyways, it's good to keep that in mind, to know these differences. But anyways, to get back to the point, when one is, among a large crowd, it's important to always consider oneself as the lowest. And the reason why is because, as I mentioned, we as sentient beings do not have control over one's own mind. And because one does not have control over one's own mind, it is very difficult to understand the minds of others. We have to be honest with ourselves. Can we really determine a person's nature, if they are a good person or a bad person? Can we really understand their intentions and their mind if we ourselves do not understand our own mind in the first place? It's very difficult if you think about that. And so therefore, the only person or the only being who can truly understand the mind of not just one, but all sentient beings as it is the fully enlightened Buddha, because the Buddha has abandoned all of the faults of ignorance. As for us, we do not have that ability. We still have ignorance in our minds. And so therefore, we cannot really say that this person is inferior, or, this person is worse off than me, or this person is better than me, and so on. But it is always safe to just believe that all sentient beings, not just humans, but even also animals, are better than oneself. Because, it's always safe to think in that way, because, as I mentioned, we cannot determine the mind of sentient beings. So if we cannot determine, and yet we try to determine a sentient being and label a person as a bad person, a fraud, or so on, as a liar, and so on, it could be dangerous, very dangerous for oneself if we are wrong about them. We would be creating a lot of bad karma for oneself. So therefore, the safest thing is just if we put all sentient beings in the category of being better than oneself. And if one puts oneself in the lower category as being, inferior than others. And as I said, you should not only look upon sentient beings such as humans in this way, but even animals, because sometimes animals, we don't know if they are really as they seem to appear. Sometimes animals can be even emanations of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And such an example would be from the story of Arya Asanga, who meditated on the Bodhisattva Maitreya for many years. And, Arya Asanga meditated on Maitreya for many, many years, but, he never saw Maitreya. He never beheld the face of Maitreya for a very, very long time. He did not behold his face. And one day, after many, many years of meditating on Maitreya, maybe possibly 12 years of, hoping, wishing, and meditating on Maitreya, Arya Asanga saw on the, on the road a dog who had many bugs on the dog, and these bugs were sort of like biting the dog's flesh. And due to that, the dog was suffering greatly. And Arya Asanga witnessed this incident, and he felt great compassion for the dog, and he wanted to help the dog. So in order to help the dog, he needed to separate the dog and the insects first. But if he just sort of like picked the insects with his own hand, because the insects are very small, they could be killed in the process. So he also considered the wellness and the well-being of the insects and not just the dog. So he licked. He was a great bodhisattva. So he was courageous enough to lick the dog, and by licking the dog with his tongue, he picked up all of the insects and separated the insects from the dog. And due to that great act of compassion, he was finally worthy enough, or he had finally, you could say, accumulated enough merit to behold the Bodhisattva Maitreya. And right after he had licked the insects off the dog transformed into Maitreya. And so it was Maitreya all this time, but because of Arya Asanga's heavy karma, he was just not able to behold Maitreya. And he asked Maitreya, I prayed to you for so long and meditated on you. Why did you not show yourself up until now? And Maitreya told him that I've been with you from the very first day, but because of your heavy karma, you were not able to see me in my true form. And if you do not believe me, you should carry me on your shoulder and walk around town and see for yourself. And so Arya Asanga placed Bodhisattva Maitreya upon his shoulder and walked around town. And when he walked around town, all of the townspeople exclaimed, "Why are you carrying a dog on your shoulder?" And so every person that he met in town said that, "Why are you carrying a dog on your shoulder?" And so, from this story, we can understand that, sometimes not all things we see are as they appear. Sometimes animals can be emanations of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to test us, to test our practice. And sometimes also Buddhas and Bodhisattvas may emanate as even beggars on the roads to give us the chance to practice generosity, or you could say charity, and so on. And the activity of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is beyond really the understanding of sentient beings. So therefore they act for the benefit of sentient beings in various ways. And so therefore, because we cannot really understand the nature of sentient beings or the nature of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, it's always good to be safe and be on the safe side and just categorize them as being greater than oneself. And so therefore, Geshe Langri Thamba writes, "And from the depths of my heart, cherish others as supreme." And so therefore, it is due to these reasons that one should always, cherish others as greater than oneself, and not just cherish them because one has been told to by Geshe Langri Thamba, but because there's good reason to. And so one should cherish all sentient beings as supreme from the very depths of one's own heart. We now come to the third verse. It reads, "In my every action, I will watch my mind, and the moment destructive emotions arise, I will confront them strongly and avert them, since they will hurt both me and others." So here, Geshe Langri Thamba is saying that at all times, whatever action one is doing, whether it is eating, walking, sitting, resting, working, whatever one is doing, one should watch, one's own mind at all times. One should keep a good watch on one's own mind. And the reason one should keep a good watch on one's own mind is because, we do not have control over one's mind, and because we have been associated with the destructive emotions such as ignorance, attachment, anger, which I've mentioned before. These, poisons or faults can appear in one's, these faults can arise in one's mind suddenly, so suddenly. And if we are not careful, once these faults have arisen in one's mind, it is likely that our actions will be directed by these faults, and due to that, it will eventually lead oneself to have great regret. So therefore, the reason why we must keep a watch on one's own mind is in order to stop these emotions, in order to recognize these emotions so that we may stop these emotions the moment they arise, so that it does not become too late in stopping them. It's important that, for example, as Dharma practitioners, and especially mind training practitioners, we look at one's own mind. It's basically like putting, in our daily lives, we have a mirror in front of oneself, a mirror to look at our own face. So the main mirror for Dharma practitioners is the mirror of mindfulness. The practice of mindfulness is the mirror for Dharma practitioners. It is the mirror in which they can look into their own minds and examine their own thoughts. So, and the reason, as I mentioned, to do this is to catch the thought the moment they arise. And I would like to put an example here in relation to this. For example, you can consider a thief which has entered one's house. So a thief may enter one's own house, and if we do not recognize the thief as a thief the moment the thief has entered one's house, later it will be too late once they have stolen something valuable, a valuable object of from one's house. It will be too late, and there will only be regret in the end. But if you are able to recognize the thief the moment they enter one's house and stop them before they commit the act of stealing, then there will be no regrets of losing some valuable object or anything like that in the end. So likewise, for Dharma practitioners, it's similar. We should, the destructive emotions like ignorance, attachment, and anger are like a very sneaky thief. We need to just recognize these destructive emotions as being faults the moment they arise in one's mind, and stop them from further sort of progressing, and abandon them the moment they arise, before it causes too much destruction and before there's only regret left. So therefore, that is a good example which can help in better understanding this verse. And as Geshe Langtamba says in the last two lines of this verse, I will confront them strongly and avert them, since they will hurt both me and others. So again, the main reason of confronting these thoughts very strongly the moment they arise is in order to avert them. Because if we do not avert them, and if we let it stay in our mind, the destructive emotions stay in our mind, it becomes sort of like the destructive emotions such as anger and attachment become more powerful minute by minute. And if that happens, then it is not good, not only for oneself but also for others. Because if we have too much anger in our minds, if we are engulfed sort of like in anger, then of course one will not be happy. It will destroy one's own peace of mind. And also, due to this strong anger, we will lash out on others We will blame whatever is not working well for oneself on others, saying they are the cause for one's suffering, and so on. And one might even end up physically harming, committing physical violence upon others. And so that is very dangerous, as you can see, not only for oneself, but also for others, because it destroys the peace in both one's own mind and the peace in the minds of others. So therefore, it is very important to catch the destructive emotions, to recognize them the moment they arise. And this is one of the very important practices of a mind training practitioner. We now come to the fourth verse. It reads, "Whenever I see ill-natured beings, or those overwhelmed by heavy misdeeds or suffering, I will cherish them as something rare, as though I had found a priceless treasure." So, when it comes to the practice of a bodhisattva, of course, it is very important to associate oneself with good friends, with good Dharma teachers, with good friends who serve as an example to become a better human being and, of course, a better practitioner. But we should also not ignore the great number of sentient beings who are suffering and who commit heavy, bad karma, or you could say misdeeds. We must feel compassion towards them and not abandon such sentient beings, but we must also always try to help them. So therefore, Geshe Langri Tamba is saying that whenever I see ill-natured beings basically mean people with, it doesn't just mean people, but any type of sentient being who can be, who has a very bad nature. They can be very angry, or very proud, or very selfish, or very arrogant, or deceiving, or so on. Whenever I see any type of such sentient beings, it can be such sentient beings, and it can also be those type of sentient beings who have committed heavy misdeeds, such as certain sentient beings who have killed one's own father, one's own mother, or killed an arahat, or killed, or you could say harmed a Buddha, or created disharmony in the Sangha community, and so on. And it can also be sentient beings who are suffering greatly. Whenever I see just basically any sentient beings who are unhappy, I will cherish them. I should cherish them as a mind training practitioner. I should cherish them all as something rare, as if I found a priceless treasure. So one may wonder, why should one, cherish such sentient beings as a priceless treasure? They sound so bad. Why should I cherish them? I mean, if I don't ignore them, at least why would I, still have to cherish them? One may wonder. It is because, as I mentioned, one of the main causes of attaining enlightenment is compassion. And for the object of compassion, it doesn't matter what type of sentient beings they are. It can be sentient beings who are doing good karma. It can be doing sentient beings who are doing bad karma. It can be sentient beings who are suffering greatly, or it can be sentient beings who are suffering, not so much. It doesn't matter. As long as they are sentient beings, they are all an object who deserve one's compassion. And so therefore, one should consider all sentient beings as something rare, similar to a priceless treasure, because as it is similar, as I mentioned earlier, they are similar to the wish-fulfilling jewel, even more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, as these sentient beings, these type of sentient beings will help lead oneself to enlightenment. And it can also help, these type of sentient beings can also help, of course, in one's own Dharma practice. For example, there's a story of the Indian master known as Atisha, who visited Tibet in the 11th century. And he is, of course, one of the early masters of the Kadamba tradition, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this teaching. So when he visited Tibet, he had brought some Indian attendants with him. And among his Indian attendants, there was one person who was very angry all the time and who would always, say bad things about Atisha. So this person was an attendant, he was accompanying, it was an Indian person, he was accompanying Atisha in Atisha's travels to Tibet. And although he was assisting, or you could say accompanying Atisha, he was sort of like, it seemed as if he was doing more harm than benefit to Atisha. And this greatly puzzled, it greatly puzzled the Tibetans. So one day, one of the Tibetan disciples of Atisha asked Atisha, why do you keep such a person with you? He always, says bad things about you. He really disrespects you from the very depths of his heart. So why do you continue to keep such a person with you? And Atisha replied, oh, this person that is accompanying me is very important to me. He is like one of my teachers. He is like a priceless treasure to me. And I regard him very highly. The reason why is because he is the teacher who helps me in my practice of patience. Because he is always saying bad things about me, it makes it, easier for me to sort of progress in my practice of patience. He serves as the object for my practice of patience. And so therefore, he is like a teacher to me, and I consider him very highly, and he is very dear to me. And that was the response by Atisha. And so as mind training practitioners, it is very important to, try to become like that, to become like Atisha, and to follow in his example. So with this, we have completed the 4th verse. We now come to the 5th verse. Whenever someone out of envy does me wrong by attacking or belittling me, I will take defeat upon myself and give the victory to others. So the main lesson of this 5th verse is basically saying that for bodhisattvas, one of the important practices of a bodhisattva is to always give victory to others and take loss upon one's own self. And so to explain this, Geshe Langri Thamba is saying that whenever, at all times, whenever somebody out of great envy, or you could say out of great jealousy towards oneself, they may attack oneself by saying things that are not true about oneself. For example, oneself may not have stolen anything, but somebody may say that person stole something, even though that person did not really steal anything. They may say that, so for example, let's put the bodhisattva. So somebody may claim or tell lies out of great jealousy towards the bodhisattva, that the bodhisattva stole something, even though the bodhisattva did not commit any acts of stealing. Or sometimes they could, say something which is not true, such as saying that the bodhisattva is something that they are not, such as that the bodhisattva is a liar, and so on. So it works both ways. The person may say something that the bodhisattva, there are two different situations basically. And somebody may say that the bodhisattva committed to something even though they did not commit it. And they may also say that the bodhisattva did not commit something good, even though the bodhisattva did commit something good. So it works both ways. And so therefore, basically, the point is out of jealousy, it is very possible that people will tell lies about you. They will try to slander your reputation. They will try to ruin your reputation. And when that happens, for the Bodhisattva, the best thing to do is to let them take the victory, let them be happy with what they have said, and to take any defeat, just accept whatever they say, whether it be a bad, even if whatever they claim is wrong, and you know that is wrong. For the Bodhisattva, the real practitioners do not care to defend themselves in such situations because they are so compassionate. They will just let others take all the victory of, having attacked oneself, of having attacked the Bodhisattva, and they will take all the blame and loss of being attacked, resulting from being attacked. And that is one of the important practices of a Bodhisattva. Only a very, very brave person is capable of practicing in such a way. And of course, the bravest person who can do this is a Bodhisattva. Otherwise, if you are not a Bodhisattva, it is very difficult to practice this. And of course, in society, it is taught the opposite, that if somebody says something wrong about you and it's not true, you need to defend yourself and make sure that they do not destroy you because they tarnish your reputation. And even if you need to go to court, you need to go to court and win the case and prove them wrong, and you need to take the victory and so on. And of course, that is understandable in society, but for, when it comes to Dharma practice, it is different. And of course, in this current life, this may seem like a great loss because you're accepting all the defeat upon yourself, giving them all the victory. And by that, you might even be, of course, letting your reputation be destroyed, and by letting other people truly think that you are a liar, or you stole something, or you killed somebody, even though you had not committed such acts. It may seem like a great loss, but if you think about future lives, then it is a great benefit, because by this, you are coming closer to enlightenment, because you are progressing in the practice of a bodhisattva, of giving happiness to others and taking suffering upon your own self. And in this way, it helps oneself. In society, those who do not practice the Dharma, of course, it is understandable that they will always try to take victory upon oneself and give loss to others, because the only thing that they are concerned about is this life. Not all people believe in future lives, and of course they don't care about enlightenment. So since they just care about this life, of course it is understandable that they would want to make sure that they are happy in this life, and in order to be happy, they must make sure that nobody ruins or destroys their reputation. But for a Dharma practitioner, as the Buddha taught, of course, it doesn't just apply to Dharma practitioners, but the Buddha said that in reality, the situation in samsara is that it's not just this life, but future lives also exist. And that is how samsara works. We believe in rebirth. So we believe in past lives, we believe in the present life, and we believe in future lives. And so therefore, it's very important that we don't just look at the benefit in this life, but we look to the benefit of future lives. I think in one of the teachings by Geshe Chekawa, Yeshidorje, Geshe Chekawa, I believe, in the 7-point mind training that I had given about a month or two earlier, I think the previous month maybe, there was something in relation to this, that in this life, we may work on something, and it may be difficult in this life to work on it. But if we know that in the future lives, there's going to be great benefit resulting from this very difficult work we are working on right now, it is worth working on it, even though it may be difficult to work on it. Because, if by understanding that it benefits oneself in the future, one should work on it now, even if it's difficult. And he said that some type of works are like, it is easy to work on it now, but it does not bring much benefit in the future. And for such types of work, we should not work on it. Because not, all easy works should be worked on, because not all easy works lead to great benefit. So especially if one is working on something right now and it is easy to do it, but it won't bring much benefit in the future, Geshe Chekawa recommended that we do not continue with such work. But if we are working on something right now, it's very difficult to work on it, but we know that it will bring great benefit in the future, we must work on it. So it sort of like has sort of like a small connection with what we are speaking on right now. It may be difficult in this life to take all the blame upon oneself, even though one is not wrong, to be accused for doing things one has not done. But if we are thinking about future lives, there's much benefit. And so therefore, in consideration of the better future, it's worth it, taking any blame or difficulties, hardships, and so on in this lifetime. And so this is the main lesson of this verse. So here, okay, I think that should be good enough for this verse. And then to continue with the 6th verse now. Even when someone I have helped or in whom I have placed great hopes mistreats me very unjustly, I will view that person as a true spiritual teacher. So the main lesson of what Geshe Langri is teaching here is that bodhisattvas, the main work of bodhisattvas is to help others. And by helping others, of course, many times the people who we have helped may repay our kindness, and that is great if they do. But in many cases, there will be people who will not repay one's kindness. And in such cases, we should not become unhappy. We should not be angry. We should not be disappointed. We should not abandon such people. But we should rather consider these type of people highly, similar to a true spiritual teacher. So to explain this in greater detail, Geshe Langri is saying that, for example, a bodhisattva may have given, may have helped somebody greatly. It can be financially, it can be, by giving the Dharma teachings and so on. So, for example, there may have been a very poor person who was doing very bad in life. And then the bodhisattva notices this person. They feel great compassion towards this person. They wish to help this person, and then they reach out to this person and they give them what they lack. So if this person is poor, the bodhisattva may give them clothes, the bodhisattva may feed them, and the bodhisattva may make sure that all of the living necessities are complete, that this person does not lack, a decent, does not lack the tools for decent living and so on. And even though the bodhisattva may have helped such a person greatly, it is sometimes very possible that the person that has been benefited by the bodhisattva may turn their backs on the bodhisattva. They may betray the bodhisattva who had earlier helped them. This person may, because they have a bad nature deep down, they may, they may not remember the kindness of the Bodhisattva, and therefore will not repay the Bodhisattva's kindness. Sometimes when people help other people and drag them out of their very difficult situation in life, and the other person who was earlier doing very difficult in life now becomes very comfortable in life. Some such people will later forget the kindness of their benefactor and will become proud that they are doing so great in life and they do not need to rely on others now. And the person who had earlier benefited them they do not mean anything to me now, so I do not need to, rely on them. I do not need to repay them. I do not need to be with them anymore, or so on, or be friends with them anymore, or so on. So, sometimes sentient beings can be very strange, the way we think. Of course, there are many people who will repay, but there are also such type of people. And in such cases, when the Bodhisattva is mistreated by the person who they had helped earlier and who they had placed such great hopes in, when they are mistreated and treated unjustly by such people, the Bodhisattva should not be sad. The Bodhisattva should be understanding that this person is, after all, in the end, just a sentient being who has no control over their emotions. And so therefore, they are an object of compassion, and they are like a true spiritual teacher who will help me progress on my path by helping me practice patience towards them. So this is the important practice of a bodhisattva. An example I would like to put here is, I would like you to just consider this example. So for example, if somebody came to you and this person is holding a long stick in their hands, and they slash this stick, or it could be a whip or just any weapon on you, and they harm you in such a way, would a normal person feel disappointed, or you could say feel anger towards the whip, the stick, or you could say the weapon, or would they feel anger towards the person who was holding the stick, who was holding the weapon? Which person, which object would you harbor your anger towards, or your resentment? Would it be towards the animate object, which is the person who harmed you, who was holding the stick? Or would it be the inanimate object, which is the stick, the whip, or the weapon itself? You need to ask yourself this question. Of course, everybody, the answer would be that a normal person would be angry at the person who hit them. They will not be angry at the stick, even though the stick is the one that actually gave them the pain. The person did not give them the pain. The person was holding the weapon, and by hitting the weapon on you, you felt the pain, and that was caused due to the weapon, directly by the weapon, of course, indirectly by the person. But still, even though the weapon is the thing that directly gave you the pain, your anger is going to not be going towards the weapon, but towards the person. And this is because you understand that the person is the one who is controlling the weapon. The weapon itself, it does not move. It does not have a mind of its own. It's the person who has decided to hit you that has hit you with the weapon. And so therefore, all your anger will be going towards the person due to your understanding that, the weapon is controlled by the person. So likewise, for bodhisattvas, when they are treated unjustly, when they are mistreated by people who they have earlier helped greatly and who they have earlier been friends with, when they are betrayed by such friends, they will also have great understanding. They will understand that, the person is like the weapon. They have no control over their minds. The thing that is controlling the person or the thing that has led the person to betray you is the ignorance, the attachment, and the anger in their minds, and that is the main fault. So although the Bodhisattva will not be angry at their, three poisons or three faults, they will at least have the understanding that the person has no control over their own thoughts, because the person is in turn controlled by the three poisons. And so therefore, it's not worth being angry at the person, because they do not have control over their minds. And so this is one of the very important practices of a bodhisattva. Now for the 7th verse, it reads, in brief, directly or indirectly, I will offer help and happiness to all my mothers, which is basically sentient beings, and secretly take upon myself all their hurt and suffering. So with this, Geshe Langri Thamba is speaking about also one of the most important practices of a bodhisattva, known as Donglen. It is also known as Dakshin Jewa. In other words, it is known as the exchange of oneself and others. Or you could call it the exchange of happiness and suffering. So this is one of the most important practices of a bodhisattva. So Geshe Langri Thamba here is saying here that in brief, many things were said earlier, but in brief, the essence of all of this is directly, it may be directly to the actions of one's body and speech, or it may be indirectly to one's mind, to the actions of one's mind. Both directly or indirectly, I will offer help and happiness to all my mothers. So basically, he is saying that the practitioner, the bodhisattva, should offer all of the happiness that is within their minds to sentient beings who have all been one's mother in one's past lives. And the way one gives help and happiness to others may be directly or indirectly. And the way you can understand directly is by understanding that, as I mentioned earlier, if we see somebody poor, we can practice generosity towards them. We can give them food, clothing, a place to live, and so on. Or we could give them a family and make them happy, and so on. And that is a way to give happiness with one's body, to one's body, as for giving happiness to others to one's speech. It could be saying good things about others, saying pleasant things to others, things that will make others happy, and so on. That is ways we could help others to give them happiness to one's speech. And both of those two ways are to help them directly, or it could be indirectly to one's mind by visualizing that I'm giving all of my happiness towards, to all sentient beings and sharing it with all sentient beings. And so in this way, the bodhisattva should practice. And as Geshe Langri Thamba says, and secretly take upon myself all their hurt and suffering. So by this, he is saying that not only should one give to others, but one should also directly as well as indirectly take upon oneself all of their suffering in their bad karma, so that they may not have to suffer. And when we do this, we can understand it directly and indirectly. For example, we can take upon their suffering directly to our body. So if they are facing many difficulties in life, living difficulties, and so on, we can take that upon ourselves and give whatever, comfortable, we can give them the comfortable life that we earlier had, and exchange our comfortable life in their difficult life, and do this exchange of happiness and suffering. And also, if it's, we can also directly take upon their suffering to our speech. And for example, if there's a bad rumor about other people, we can take upon that bad rumor and say that it's not them, it was I who did it, and take all the blame upon oneself, and by that we can relieve them from their suffering, even though oneself had not done anything wrong. We can still take the blame upon oneself as a bodhisattva, and let one's own reputation get ruined, of course, as long as it fixes the reputation of others. That is the practice of a bodhisattva. And indirectly, of course, it comes back to the visualization. Earlier, we visualized that we give all of our happiness towards others. And now we visualize that we take all of their suffering and it comes into oneself, and so that they do not need to suffer. And they can instead enjoy all of one's own happiness that one has given them, in which one has exchanged. So in this way, the bodhisattva must train. And so this is very important. There is a saying in The Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva that so that verse speaks about the exchange of oneself and others, and what Shantideva says in that verse is that all of the suffering that sentient beings, suffer, the main reason why sentient beings suffer or they have suffering is because they are always just wishing for their own happiness. They don't care about others. They just want to be happy. And so because they only wish for their own happiness, in the end, that leads to suffering for themselves. Sorry, this verse is not by Shantideva. This is by Gyatso Tome. So sorry, I'm getting a bit confused now. But this verse is by Gyatso Tome and taught in the 37 practices of a bodhisattva. So he is saying that all of the suffering that one has, all of the suffering that sentient beings have, come from the thought of wishing for one's own happiness, and enlightenment, the state of enlightenment, arises from the thought of benefiting other sentient beings. Therefore, exchanging one's happiness and suffering by giving one's happiness to others and taking upon their suffering upon oneself, that is such an exchange of happiness and suffering is the practice of a Buddha. So this is what Gyatso Tome, the great Tibetan and Sakya master, taught in the 37 practices of a bodhisattva. And so this is one of the main practices that any bodhisattva must train in. And one may wonder, if one takes upon one's suffering, others' suffering, and gives one own happiness, then won't one end up in suffering oneself, and won't that just be a loss for oneself? But that's not the case. Only victory only comes by taking loss upon oneself. The law of karma can be complicated to understand, but it is very profound, the way it works. It is difficult to comprehend. But because, the Buddha taught that the more you give, the more you get. The more you give, the more you get when it comes to generosity. And that might not make sense to many people, because the more you give, the less you have now, because you've given everything that you've had to others. So wouldn't that mean that, you have much less compared to what you had earlier? So what does that mean? That doesn't make sense. But of course, we must not forget that it's just not all about this life, but there are also future lives. And In the future lives, it is likely that we will get back. And sometimes it is also possible that we will receive a lot in return in this life itself. So the way karma works is very wondrous, I guess you could say. So we should keep that in mind and not feel discouraged in our Dharma practice. Now we come to the 8th verse. It reads, I will learn to keep all these practices untainted by thoughts of the 8 worldly concerns. May I recognize all things as like illusions and without attachment gain freedom from bondage. So Geshe Langri is saying here that I will learn, and just not just he himself, but the person who is practicing the mind training, you must make the commitment to learn all of these earlier mentioned practices. And the way we practice these, while we practice these, our practice should not be tainted by the thoughts of the 8 worldly concerns. So the 8 worldly concerns is a very big trap. It's also known as the 8 worldly dharmas. Once we fall into any of these categories, or once we fall into any of the 8 worldly dharmas, which are like traps, then we lose the focus of our dharma practice, and we become easily discouraged, and our sense of peace and happiness will become lost. So to speak about the 8 worldly dharmas, I'll just name each of them. The first is called gain. The first is gain, and then the second is loss. So the first 2 are opposites. The third and the fourth are opposites. The 5th and the 6th are opposites, and the 7th and 8th are opposites. So it's like that. And so you can just check that anytime after the teaching is completed. You will find it on the web. And so it is easy to search. So it's known as the 8 worldly concerns, and also known as the 8 worldly dharmas. So the first is gain, and the second is loss. So as Dharma practitioners, we should not fall into any of the traps. If we gain something, we should not be too happy. And if we lose something, we should not be too sad. And then the third is I think it's easier to put it this way. So because they are related to each other. The first 2 are pleasure at gaining something and displeasure at not gaining the objects of desire. So if we gain something, if we get something that we really wanted and we become too happy, that's not a good sign, that's not a good thing. And if we become too sad or too unhappy that we didn't get the thing that we wanted, that is also not a good thing. So if a bodhisattva gets something that they wanted, that's good. They shouldn't be too excited. And if they don't get something that they didn't want, if they don't get something that they wanted, they should not be too unhappy about it, but just let it pass. And then there's the second pair, which is happiness and sadness. And that is also not good. We should not be too happy, nor should we be too sad when it comes to practicing the Dharma. And then then the second pair after that is praise and degrade. So we should not be too excited if other people praise oneself, and we should not be too unhappy if they say bad things about oneself, as both will just will end up making you lose the balance in your mind. And then the last pair is pleasing and unpleasing speech. Most people like to hear something very pleasing, and they'll become unhappy when they hear something very unpleasing. But a Dharma practitioner, and especially a bodhisattva, should just not really care too much about hearing something pleasant or hearing something unpleasant. So these are the 8 worldly concerns, and we should not fall into the trap of any of these. So Geshe Narli Thamba is saying that when we practice any of the earlier mentioned practices that he mentioned, it should not be mixed with the 8 worldly concerns. That's one thing. And also he writes, may I recognize all things as like illusions. And so this means that whatever we perceive in our daily lives, may we see it with wisdom, may we perceive it with wisdom and not with ordinary perception, but see it as being not truly existing, but rather more like a mirage, a sort of like a mirage, or something that is, you can also think of it like a rainbow. A rainbow is very colorful. It has vibrant colors, but if you go to touch it, or if you try to touch it, there's nothing you can touch. In a way, it has no true nature. So likewise, everything we see in life is very colorful. It may be alive. It looks very vibrant, but if we really delve into its true nature, we'll find that everything is emptiness. So therefore, it's good as a bodhisattva, it's important to train oneself in seeing things as similar to an illusion. And this is very important. And when we practice all of the earlier practices, it's important to practice it by understanding that, that everything is an illusion, similar to an illusion. And he also writes, and without attachment, gain freedom and bondage. And so when we practice, we should also not have attachment. And by this, he means that we should not be attached to the 3 spheres. And so the 3 spheres are the practitioner, oneself, who is oneself. That is the first sphere. The second is the object of one's practice, which is the sentient beings who are suffering. And then the third is the practice itself. It could be the practice of mind training, for example. So when we practice, we should not be too attached. Actually, we should not be attached to the concept that I am the practitioner. That person is the object of my practice, and this is the practice which I am practicing. If we have attachment to these 3 spheres, then it does not become a true practice which will lead to enlightenment. Of course, one will be accumulating good karma through the practice, but it will just still not become the type of practice which can lead to enlightenment. For example, we have the 6 perfections, which are the main practices of a bodhisattva. So that is generosity, moral conduct, patience, and diligence, meditative concentration, wisdom, and those are the 6 perfections. And if you give, of course, that is generosity. It is good. By doing that, you will be accumulating good karma. But if you are attached to the thought that I am the person, I'm the benefactor, I'm the person that I'm giving. This is the person that is receiving the gift, and this is the gift that is being given. If you have such attachment to the 3 spheres, then the practice is generosity, but it does not become the perfection of generosity. And because it is not the perfection of generosity, it does not become a cause to attain enlightenment, and so on. And so similarly, these practices should also be without attachment. And if we can practice these without attachment to the concept that I am the practitioner, this is the object of my practice, and this is the practice itself, then the whole practice, all of the practices that we perform will be a perfection. It will be a cause for attaining enlightenment. So we must also make sure that our practices are without attachment to the 3 spheres. And so therefore, Geshe Narli Thamba is saying that when one practices all of these practices, if one practices without the 8 worldly concerns, without the taints of the 8 worldly concerns, and if we practice while recognizing all things as being similar to an illusion, and if we can practice without attachment to the 3 spheres, then we can gain freedom from bondage, which is bondage, which is basically ignorance and the 3 poisons and so on. We will be free from such bondages in the end, and we will attain liberation, which is basically complete enlightenment. So, as I mentioned earlier, these were taught by Geshe Langri Tamba. He claims that, and it is true that he himself practiced all of these 8 points. He prays here that he may not only be able to practice these now, but also in the future. And he encourages his followers to practice these teachings as the hot essence. So with this, I've completed the teaching on the 8 verses of training the mind. And I think, yes, I was also asked to give a all transmission on this mind training. So I received this the all transmission on this mind training from one of my teachers, who was known by the name of Khöndung Asanga Rinpoche. So I will give the all transmission of this now. Lojong tsige ma shu so dani simje tamje la yishino le la be tenshu zhibe samba ye dadu jeba zimba sho kanzo sudan jobe tse dani kunle menta shin shen la samba taba ye chodu jeba zimba sho junlam kundu rangyu la dojin yomong kema ta dashin marun chebe na zen tab dongni doba sho ra shingin be simje na dikdu chaben nen tongtse rinjinde da cheba shin nyebra gawe jezin sho dala shingi chadogi shiguru la so miribe kyangkorangi lembadang Gyagashin la bulwa sho Kanadagi pentabe rewa chewa kanshigi shindo miri neje nang shinyen tamba dawa sho dona musum gyuba yi pende manam kun la bul mai nedang dunga kun sanwe dala lembar sho teda kungyang chugegi dobitime mabashin chugun gyuma shebelo sheme chingwa le dolo sho jebadini geshe lang tangba dorje singi so with this I've given the all transmission on this teaching. And along with this, I was asked to give some advice on meditation, because Sangchen Norbu Ling is a very secluded place, and all of the practitioners are focusing solely on meditation, and they are far from the distractions of the city. And it is, of course, a very secluded and wonderful place to practice. And they were asking for some advice or tips on meditating. And so I will give some tips on meditation. So the tips that I will give are from a teaching by the great Indian saint Mahasiddha Avathutipa. And I will not give the full teaching on this, but just the main essence of it. Actually, there are 8 tips, but and each of these tips has a story, a background story to tell, but I will not mention this because we don't have that time right now. But anyways, when we meditate, the first tip I have to give is that we should not have great hope. Because, sometimes people have such great hope that by meditating, I will attain magical powers, or, these great qualities will arise in one's mind immediately, or I will attain enlightenment very soon. And they have such great hope, and then they enter into their meditation. And then when things don't turn out as they hoped for, when they don't attain any magical powers, when they don't attain any meditative concentration or focused meditation, or stability in their meditation, or when they don't, when the good qualities don't arise in their mind, and especially when they don't attain enlightenment very soon. There are actually several people nowadays who I've heard at several Buddhist centers who complain that I meditated for 25 years and I have still not attained enlightenment. Why is that? And they're just so shocked that they still haven't attained enlightenment after all of this. So, they put too much expectations on themselves in the first place. They have too much hope. And when there's too much hope, it leads to suffering. Of course, one should understand the results resulting from, the benefits resulting from the meditation, but one should not put too much hope in the first place. One should not, of course, one should not also be discouraged, thinking that I am not capable of doing anything, I'm just a nobody. Of course, I can't attain enlightenment. That's not right either. But you should also not have too much hopes that I will attain enlightenment so soon in this very lifetime and so on. Because in the end, if it doesn't work out, then what's left will only be disappointment. So when you meditate, you should always meditate without any hope. Hope itself is a great distraction. So that is something to look out for. The second thing that one should look out for or avoid in order to have a good meditation is material things. Material things can be a great distraction, like a very fancy car or lots of money or, so on. Things that we are, material things that we are attached to. These such things will take our focus off our meditation and will take our focus and place our focus on the material things. So therefore, these can also serve as a trap to, or a distraction, you could say, to meditation. So therefore, if there is anything particularly that you are extremely attached to, it's good to not have that around while you are meditating. It's good to stay, to keep your distance from the things that you are attached to. And the third advice that I would give for meditating is to avoid the chores of the household. Basically, you need to be far away from your home, because when you're at home, you have your family with you, and there's a lot of conversations, things that they will say, a lot of chores of the household, a lot of things that you'll have to do, a lot of work in the house, such as cleaning or cooking, or just it could be any other work in the house, and all of this will not be good for your meditation. And so therefore, it's always recommended that if you want a very perfect or very good meditation, you should always try to find a secluded place and not stay within your household, within your home. For, of course, the meditators or the practitioners who are very advanced, they will be able to practice in their home even amidst distractions, because they have trained their minds so well. But for the very beginners, it is difficult to do so, and it's best to create the right conditions for good meditation, and that would be to go to a secluded place like Sangchen Norbu Ling. So you should go there. And then the next tip that I have to give regarding meditation is to go into the woods. But it, of course, doesn't have to be going just into the woods. It can be going to the hills, as long as it's not like near a city or, a very busy place. The main reason why we must, as I mentioned earlier, why we must stay away from the household is because there's a lot of work in the household. And that also becomes a distraction, as I mentioned, to one's meditation. And so therefore we need to go to a secluded place. And now what Master Avadutipa says is the secluded place that we go to. What kind of secluded place one should go to is the woods, because it is very peaceful in the woods. But when we say that, we don't mean the woods which have very wild animals and very poisonous sort of snakes, and woods that are very dangerous. We should avoid such woods, but go to the very safe woods to practice, and maybe pitch a tent and stay there for a night or two and try some meditation in the natural atmosphere of the woods. But it doesn't have to be woods necessarily. One can also go to a very secluded hill and practice meditation there as well. as long as it's secluded and there are very sort of like gentle animals, not, you know, too much wild animals. And in such a place, one should seek in order to practice meditation. And when one practices meditation, one must always make sure to focus on, to always concentrate. Meditation requires concentration. And with a distracted mind, one will not be able to meditate and one will not be focused. And, you know, a distracted mind is no better than an ordinary mind of a person living in a busy city among the commotion. So therefore, we must always try to make sure that we are concentrated on whatever we are meditating on. And if we notice that we are becoming distracted and our mind is you know, wandering everywhere, we must bring it back with our mindfulness, with our attentiveness. We must bring one's wandering mind back to the present moment and get, you know, let it concentrate once again upon the object of one's meditation. So that is necessary. Actually, you know, it's just not meditation, not only meditation, but whatever Dhamma practice we do, we should always be concentrated. There's a saying, so what that means is that whether we are doing, you know, mantra recitations, or whether we're doing, you know, undergoing hardships for the Dharma, if we do such things for a very long time, however long it may be, if we do it with a distracted mind, then there's no benefit. There will not be any benefit in the end, or not any great benefit in the end. And that was taught by the Buddha, that there's no great benefit in whatever Dhamma practice you do if you do it with a distracted mind. So it's always important to do it with a concentrated mind. And that applies to meditation, of course, as well. And the last advice that there is to sort of meditate alone. If one is in the company of many people, it can be very difficult at times to practice meditation. Because there's just, however many people there are, it's more likely, of course, it's not necessarily, but, you know, more likely that there will be more distractions. And, you know, for Sangchen Norbu Ling, for example, of course, there's a whole Sangha there practicing meditation together, and that is itself is not a problem. That is fine. But when you're in the actual meditative session, it's good to meditate separately. And for that, during my last visit, I did notice that each person has their own separate sort of like huts. So that is fine. It works. That is good. And that's a good thing that you have your separate huts for the meditation. And then time to time, of course, you can gather in the large round hall you have and discuss the Dharma together. And of course, you can share lunch and dinner and breakfast together, and you know, meet each other. But during the actual meditation session, it's good to just stay in your own hut, try to focus and stay concentrated. So that is all of my advice on you know, regarding meditation. So thank you. And now following this, we will recite some dedication prayers of dedicating the merit, because through giving Dharma teachings, there's great merit for the teacher, and there's also great merit for all of you who have been listening to the Dharma teachings, and we must not let all of these merits that we have accumulated go to waste. So therefore we must dedicate it. and we must dedicate it towards the enlightenment of all sentient beings. So basically that means that we must pray that may all the merits that I have accumulated from receiving the teachings today serve as a cause for all sentient beings to temporarily be happy, to be endowed with happiness, and be freed from suffering. And ultimately, may all of the merit that I have accumulated today serve as a cause for all sentient beings to attain perfect and complete enlightenment. And so for this, I will now recite the dedication merit. So, Lama Diye Tham Je Se Pa Nye Toi Ne Nye Be Da Na Pam Je Ne Ge Ga Na Che Ba Loin Chu Pa Yi Si Be Tso Le Zho Wa Ra Sho Chang Ba Ba Wo Chi Dai Kien Pa Dai Gun Do Sang Bu Te Yang Te Shin Te Te Da Gun Ge Je Sun Da Lo Qin Ge Wai Di Da Tam Che Ra Du Ngu Tu Sun She Be Ga Wai Tam Che Ye Mu Wai Kan Lai Cho Du Ma Ba Ti Da Ge Ge We Za Wai Di Ge Kyang Sang Boi Chi Chi Ra Du Ngo Wa Ra Gi Chang Chu Gyo We Gyo Bai Chu Gyo Bai Ke Zhui Gya Tzu Yong Su Kang We Ne Ka Ri Chu Di Den Ba San Zi Ba Sa Ya Ba Ye Den Ba Ge Gyu Ru Chi Ka Jen Pe Gi De Wa Ran To Ro Chi Den Ba Den Sa Ge Chu Si Ge Ba Dang Zhu Be Dong Ge Gin Che Me Ba Dang Gin Gyang Chen De Nam Ka Nyam Ba Ra Shong. So with this, we have completed the dedication and merit. And once again, I would like to thank Sangchen Norbu Ling for requesting and organizing this teaching, and also to Sakya Friends as
И
well
на этом мы закончили
for
посвящение заслуг. И я
organizing
хочу
the translation of this teaching into, I believe, 12 different
поблагодарить
languages.
Центр
And so
Sangchen
I would like
Norbu
to
Ling, а
thank all
также
of the translators
сообщество
here
друзья.
for all of the effort you have put in making these teachings available in the many different languages. So from the bottom of my heart, I would like to offer my many thanks and gratitude. Thank you.
Rinpoche, thank you very much. Quisiera, si es posible, hacer las plegarias a los gurús, a los maestros, y después finalizamos. Okay?
So I would like to do the homage to the Guru, if this is okay for you, Rinpoche, and then we will end up this session.
Okay. Holiness Lama Rinpoche Daki chewo pame desune kadren chenpo wone desunte kun sun tu kenu nodru sadru sol na wangutru lawe konjisin kansu pendal warwa malu yurwene chenre sin wanten sin diatsoji siampe site bardu tenjurji na wangutru larin konjindu drogunga te chen donan la pende paldu arwe tren lechen sampe wanji yalpo siaten sol na wangu dempe sarwanjur ke kun welodru kunjinje si sinan rendrecho drepenso wangi yalwe wanshu sapten sol drola kungye paje rinchen sun sikto rin sun kyense nupe par kundundri me gozar trupelku dorje simpe sun ke siapten sol Chime wampo yalwa se palme chikiene don le drotarema Shidrandu ki punlina parju chime la chor sanki se palso nawan se chosunki drunjirile tendrol kungar kipe nanchojen tome yundru trinle dorjeji sensungan kyo chende drusar tensho de tanine surwarape tu se tensito san rampelwe sedandrupe Jesu sakyape rinlun zinchen palwe zaziso. Muchas gracias. Y ahora, muchísimas gracias, Rinpoche, por estar con nosotros y entregarnos estas importantes enseñanzas, muy importantes enseñanzas. Nos gustaría, si es posible, tenerlo con nosotros infinitas veces.
Thank you very much, Rinpoche, for being with us and giving us these important teachings. We would like, if possible, to have you with us again and again.
Bien sea online bien sean online o en nuestro bonito centro de Sangchen Norbu Ling.
Either online or in our beautiful center, Sangchen Norbu Ling.
También,
Thank you very much.
También queremos agradecer a Sakya Family por su increíble esfuerzo cariñoso y amable que nos han prestado. Thank you.
And we would also like to thank the Sakya family for their incredible and loving and kind efforts and for everything that they have given us.
Y como no, a toda la sangha de Sangchen Norbu Ling, que lo ha dado todo por estos momentos tan beneficiosos para todos.
And of course, we would like to thank to all the Sangchen Norbu Ling Sangha who have given their all for these beneficial moments. They have given their all for all of us.
Y no me quiero olvidar tampoco de María José Tobías Cid, como todos los traductores, que no sé el nombre, todos los que habéis hecho posible que se pueda traducir en 12 idiomas, transmitir este mensaje de Rinpoche, esta enseñanza del Buda, a todos.
And I also wanted to thank all the interpreters for their endless kindness and their translations, for making this possible to have all these beautiful teachings in all these 12 different languages. Thank you very much to all the translators and interpreters.
Que el Buda Dharma esté siempre en nuestros corazones y nos acompañe hasta la iluminación. Gracias. Thank you very much.
May the Buddha Dharma always be present in our hearts and with us till we reach the enlightenment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.